I, as a teacher, enjoyed watching them be productive in their struggle. Okay, so this is my take on using built-in thinking classrooms this year. Super excited, right? And read through the entire book last summer, and I could see real benefit in using these methodologies in my 10th grade English classroom. So during March, I believe it was, I completed a mid-year survey. I also did an end-of-the-year survey, but the questions were a little different. But I want to go through some of these questions. I did get 84 responses. So one of the questions that I asked was, how do you feel about working in small groups for literature analysis, discussions, and writing tasks, right? So 50% of these students said, I like it sometimes, but prefer working alone. 21.4% says, I don't like it, I prefer working independently. And 26.2% said, I enjoy it and learn better this way. In our group activities, how often do you feel that your ideas are heard and valued? So 51.2% said most of the time. 17.9% said sometimes, and 26.2% said rarely. And 26.2% said always, and then the green represents the rarely. Then I gave a list of different activities that we do in class, and I asked which of these activities help you understand literature the most, and they could select up to 3. So overwhelmingly, because they could choose 3, teacher explanation, right? But I find I'm going to come back to that one. So 61% said teacher explanation. Making connections to the real world was 43%. Creative projects, 23%. Writing assignments, 32%. Whole class discussions, 47%. Small group discussions, 34%. And then how comfortable are you now with analyzing themes, questioning an author's intent, and making connections between text? So 63.1% said somewhat comfortable, I can do this with guidance. 23.8% said very comfortable, I do this well on my own. And 13.1% said not very comfortable, I still struggle with these tasks. Have the open-ended question and inquiry, the whiteboard activities, help you think more deeply about what we read. So 41.7% said somewhat, but I still need more support. 45.2% says yes, I feel more confident analyzing text. And 13.1% said not really, I prefer a different approach. How do you feel about presenting your group's ideas to the class? 42.9% said I don't mind, but I get nervous. 17.9%, I don't like it and try to avoid it. 25% said I prefer writing my ideas rather than speaking. And 14.3% says I enjoy it and I feel confident. Now, I did ask them what's one change we could make to improving class discussions, group work, or writing activities. So some things that came up about, more feedback, if we're working in groups, getting more people to talk, because seemed like they liked the groups, but didn't like the fact that maybe one person out of 3 wouldn't do any talking. Letting us work alone, not in random groups. We could do different types of group activities, okay? Clarification, I think that was a big one that I talked to my students about. Being clear on what the directions are. Options to work on their own, pick their own groups. Again, when they're working in groups, um, people not talking, um, giving them an option to work in a group or not work in a group. But again, making sure people are actively participating, more understanding, better examples. That's a theme within this. Um, the theme of not everybody participating. And I think it's like 1 out of 3 that was a problem with an in particular group. More people in each group, even though the small groups were 2, but maybe bigger groups. Some people said they'd rather work in smaller groups of 2. Um, but it's the level of participation, right? There were people who participated and they didn't like the fact that there were people who did not participate. I see that a lot. Give everyone a chance to speak aloud, or everyone write their responses down. Less group work, right? Weekly feedback. I saw that. Better communication skills. So, what is something about English class this year you really enjoyed? Group work, nothing. Annotating, nothing. Group projects. When the class is talking, I guess class discussions, right? So that's a common thing. Okay, so my takeaway is this, having been the teacher in the room, right? I believe that students did enjoy the building thinking classrooms activities. I think they did not like the fact that sometimes there were people in their groups that didn't participate. Now, I do have a significant, I wouldn't say necessarily significant, but a number of students who are multilingual learners, right? And so there would be a lack of participation sometimes on their part, but they stood the boards. I had them try to participate at some level, whether they were writing down what people were saying or something like that. But they weren't doing a lot of the thinking because they couldn't always communicate in English. So that was one group of students that had very low participation but got a lot out of the activities. Another group would be those who were reluctant to participate, but they stood at the boards. All my students stood at the boards regardless. And they would kind of stand there and look at the the assignment, but it took them a long time to become participants. And sometimes they would participate more depending on who was in their group. But for instance, I had a group, a class that had a lot of boys and a few girls, or a lot of girls and a few boys. And if I put a boy in a group of girls, they felt a little outnumbered. But they were random groups, so that would happen. And then the idea of clarity. I was in a conference with Kelly Gallagher just yesterday with my school system, my school district, and he was talking about having to know stuff before you can read stuff, right? I think that's the name of his book. And that is one of the things that my students don't necessarily bring to a conversation, is they don't bring the background knowledge of how to do something. As the year progressed, I had to give very concrete descriptions of what we were doing. Like, I had to put an example on the board, not just suggestions, I had to do sentence starters or examples or both. So one of the things that I want to start off the year with is one book that I can use throughout the year and do all of my examples from. I'm going to use a picture book because at the beginning of the year we do narratives, and I'm going to do a picture book. I'm going to do After the Fall. It's a book about Humpty Dumpty. But I want to use it for our fiction examples so that when we have to do things at the board that deal with fiction, I can pull my examples from that book because it's simple, it's something they can understand, and something they can relate to, and something they can look back at quickly to be able to understand what to do. I think they all need a shared experience like that picture book for me to pull examples from, for them to understand what I'm asking them to do when I'm saying, we're developing our thinking about the theme and our thinking about how the character helps develop the theme and how does the plot develop the theme and how does the setting develop the theme. If they have a shared knowledge about a text that's short and easy, that I can draw examples from, along with giving them those sentence starters, I think they'll be more successful. Because the more detailed I got with my sentence starters towards the end, the better the groups performed at the board and the less confused they were. But also, we have been doing it for a while as well, so that could be it as well. But my takeaway from the survey is that they did enjoy we call it classwork at the boards. And I think one of the reasons why they enjoyed the classwork so much at the boards is because I only had two rules: no cell phones, and everyone must participate, which of course is hard to gauge and trying to force people to participate. However, there was a deeper level of participation because they could not have their cell phones at the board. That was just a no. There was a deeper level of participation because they were all standing, or I had stools that they could sit on if they needed to, but they were not near the tables. They could not sit at the tables, and so therefore they felt more inclined to participate. The standing really did help with that because they could not be distracted by their Chromebook or their cell phone or the myriad of things that they become distracted by. Can I, as a teacher, do much better with these strategies? Yes, absolutely. I can do much better with these strategies. I think I did the best I could within the first year. I used it pretty regularly. There was like third quarter we used it the least because we were reading a novel. But first, second, and fourth quarter were pretty much heavily into using our building thinking classroom strategies. And I, as a teacher, enjoyed watching them be productive in their struggle. And I saw them be productive in their struggle. I need to move further into the book with the thin slicing and going back and having them take notes and things of that nature, something I want to implement more this year. I think they may get even more out of it. I definitely think they'll get more out of it when I start utilizing those strategies. However, in my survey, there was 61% who said that 72.6% said teacher explanation was their class activity that helped them understand literature the most. And I think that's because that's the easiest. If I feed it to them, if I just give it to them, then they don't have to do the thinking. So it was the easiest. Creative projects are the hardest, right? And so because they have to do so much of the thinking. So I think that these numbers really have to say who's doing the thinking. And then they choose that one when they're not doing the thinking. So I'm okay with that. I understand that. But I want to move more and more away from me having to explain and for them to be able to take more ownership of their own learning. So this is my contribution to the conversation about what worked, what may not have worked. Will I be doing it this year? Absolutely. And I will make another video about some of the changes that I'm going to implement this year that I think will be really helpful in this using the building thinking classroom strategies, as well as just trying to deal with AI in the classroom and things of that nature.